And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you in part by the good folks Melissa Gott and her team over at the Law Group. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call 910-251-6088. We'll have more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Well, it is a chilly start to a Veterans Day across southeastern North Carolina. Happy Veterans Day, and thanks to all of those that have been willing to and currently are willing to give the ultimate sacrifice to protect the freedoms, the way in which we can live our lives each and every day. And there are a variety of Veterans Day events taking place across the Cape Fear region today over at the park coming up a little bit later on this morning. You've got the New Hanover County Veterans Council will be hosting their ceremony at 11 o'clock. That's going to be at the Gold Star Monument, which is over at Longleaf, formerly Hugh McCrae Park. Cape Fear Community College is hosting a Veterans Day ceremony as well. That's happening at Union Station downtown. That also starts at 11 o'clock at UNCW. Their Veterans Day ceremony, they're hosting a luncheon. That event takes place from 10:30 to 1, and the ceremony is going to be taking place at the Clock Tower Lounge. The ceremony will be held at the amphitheater, so that's going to be taking place outside over at UNCW. In Brunswick County, a bunch of events going on as well. The Belleville Riverwalk Veterans Day event is happening. St. James Veterans Day celebration is taking place, ceremony I should say, is taking place at 11. The town of Belleville has got their Operation Greenlight that is taking place over in Columbus County. There's an event taking place in Whiteville as well. Up in Pender County, Topsail Beach is hosting a wreath-laying ceremony, 11 o'clock at Town Creek Park, and there are some other events, including one in Burgaw as well. All of this available. WECT's got a great article this morning, Veterans Day events happening across the Cape Fear region. I'm going to get over to Longleaf for the event at 11 o'clock and pay respects to those both currently in service and those that are now veterans out of service, and of course honoring all of those, even though it is not Memorial Day, honoring all of those that gave the ultimate sacrifice in protecting the freedoms that we enjoy and the way in which we get to live our lives here each and every day. And a cold start it is across the United States, southeastern North Carolina. I caught this post on X just a little while ago showing all of the places across the country that have temperatures that are in below freezing, below 32 degrees as of 6 o'clock. And you can, 6 o'clock this morning, you can pretty much see here, I mean, the entire eastern seaboard was stretching all the way from practically the Canadian border all the way down to portions of North Florida, some areas here in southeastern and eastern North Carolina as well, feeling some of these freezing temperatures to start the day today, pretty much going almost all the way to the Midwest, those very cold temperatures as of the 6 o'clock hour. And then I caught this video on X last night, some snow flurries taking place across Wilmington. Great local photographer Jed Whitley posted this on his X account last night. You can see the background there, the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, some parts of Front Street in 3rd Street in downtown Wilmington showing you got the Christmas lights in effect and some snow falling as he was out there taking some night shots of some snow flurries. So even here in early November, some chilly days across the region. Looking at the forecast, it is going to be a cold one today. Temperatures only getting into the middle and upper 40s before things get a little bit warmer, and actually looks to be a pretty nice weekend. Temperatures in the lower and middle 70s as we get back into Saturday and Sunday. So little cold snap. Things will recover as we head into the middle and latter parts of November, and not before too long we'll be looking at some December weather here across southeastern North Carolina. All right, taking a look at some news this morning, we continue our coverage of the government shutdown. We are now in the official 42nd day of the shutdown. However, it would appear that potentially as early as tomorrow, maybe Thursday, the longest government shutdown in U.S. history will come to an end. We go back last night in the United States Senate as the stalemate had officially ended. The Senate officially voted in favor of a continuing resolution. 8 Democrats working and crossing the aisle with their Republican counterparts to vote in favor of this new continuing resolution, which keeps the federal government funded until late January of next year. It does include some long-term funding to the end of the fiscal year, which is end of October 2026, to keep the government funded and operational. You can see there Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Tim Kaine, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, Senator Jackie Rosen, Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Senator Angus King, Senator Jaheen Shaheen, and Senator Maggie Hassan. All those are the 8 that voted in favor with the Republicans on that test vote that we talked about that took place Sunday night. And once again, as votes took place in the United States Senate Monday night, these 8 still crossed the aisle. The only Republican not voting for it, of course, Rand Paul, who seemingly is not and continues not to vote for anything that the Republicans are in favor of. Not really sure what's going on with him. He is very much fallen out of favor with Republicans. And, I guess I'll just say this, and I don't want to go on a tangent on, Senator Paul. Of course, over in the House, you've got Thomas Massie, who's a complete and utter jackass. I'm not going to spend too much time on these guys because they're just irrelevant. And I mean, that is the unfortunate reality of individuals, 2 of which, both of those guys, who I think previously had a lot of support from conservatives and Republicans. And you just look at it now, and these guys just don't do anything. I mean, there's one thing to stand up on your morals. There's one thing to stand up and say, I'm not going to cave on this. I don't believe this is right. But then there's another thing to just be completely ineffective and useless at your job. And we see this. And this is something that, for example, Democrats in the North Carolina General Assembly deal with consistently. And one of the examples is a local representative. I'll point to Deb Butler, who represents the House District 18, which covers the vast majority of downtown Wilmington. She's useless. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I don't know her. I'm not going to opine on that. But she's just useless. Now, she gets up and she speaks and she yells and screams on the floor of the House and makes a spectacle. But when rubber meets the road, when you elect somebody, whether you're talking about a senator, whether you're talking about a member of Congress, whether you're talking about a member of the North Carolina legislature, you want these individuals to do something. That is what you are electing them to do, to govern. And I get it, when you're not in the majority, it's hard to govern, sure. But for somebody like Senator Rand Paul, for somebody like Congressman Thomas Massie, these guys are in the majority. And not only are they against seemingly every Republican proposal that comes forward, they don't do anything else. Right? It's one thing if they were kind of running an opposite track and trying to solve and fix all of these problems. You'd say, all right, this guy, this gal, they're not they're not buying in hook, line, and sinker. They're doing their own thing, but they're not. They're doing nothing. And so there's a lot of pressure on Senator Rand Paul, and I don't think his election is in 2026. It must be in 2028. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Thomas Massie will have an election coming up next year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there, as I think Republicans, across the country, but obviously what matters most is those in your district want results. And I mean, stonewalling and voting against the Republicans 100% of the time, which is seemingly what Rand Paul and Thomas Massie have done, I can't imagine puts either of these guys in favor with their delegation. I can't imagine puts them in favor with their constituents, who overwhelmingly in both of those places, in the state and in the district that Massie represents, overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump to be the president of the United States. And so they want their senator, they want their congressman to work with the president. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything all the time. That doesn't mean that you have to swallow your pride and cast bad votes. That's not what I'm saying. I don't have an issue with individuals not always voting for everything. But when you are consistently not voting for anything, I think that begins to draw some questions and draw some concerns and problems from your constituents. So just a little bit of a tangent there, but once again, Senator Rand Paul, who has made no additional proposals at all, except for saying, oh, we need to do a better job. We need to pass all of the appropriations bills. Yeah, sure. I agree with that. But unless you're going to hop back in a time machine and go back, 8 months and begin that process, complaining about it now and saying, well, we need to do this better doesn't move us past the point that we are right now. I mean, it doesn't really solve any issues that we're dealing with right now. So those 8 Democrat senators crossed the aisle. They broke with Schumer. They broke with the rest of the Democrats in the United States Senate, supported this CR that will keep the government open until January the 30th. Of 2026. That's if the appropriation bills are not passed by that point, we will once again likely hit a deadline and go into another government shutdown. And so with that official passage on the 41st day, that CR is now headed and is now officially in the United States House. And so what we're going to be watching, and from some of the reporting that I've had the chance to read last night and this morning, it appears that according to House Speaker Mike Johnson, that the votes could take place as early as tomorrow on Wednesday, as Johnson has called back all members of the House to get back to D.C. to get ready to cast some votes. If not Wednesday, Thursday. Presumably it will pass in the House. Once that happens and once that goes forward, it will make its way to President Donald Trump's desk for a signature. Again, presumably, we haven't heard anything otherwise as of right now, but it will make its way to his desk. He will sign off on the CR, and the federal government will reopen. You will see paychecks beginning to flow. You'll see some big paychecks for federal employees, as a bunch of back pay is all going to be added in there. So that is the process that we are going to watch unfold over the next probably 24 to 48 hours. Nothing substantial has changed since the weekend. Some more progressive members of Congress, either in the Senate or in the House, continue to lambaste leadership, continue to be pissed off at Chuck Schumer, continue to be pissed off at somebody like Dick Durbin, even though Schumer didn't vote for it, calling for his resignation, calling for him to step aside as the Senate minority leader. He's lost control. He can no longer govern. Talked about some of that yesterday. Pretty much from a sentiment perspective, pretty much everything is the same. No major movement on it in any significant path. We just now wait for the House. Could be as early as today. Could be as late as tomorrow. Could be as early as today. Doesn't seem likely, but it could be today. And then we'll see it head on over to President Donald Trump's desk. So nothing major there. But I did catch an interesting opinion piece last night over at the New York Post that I wanted to read through a little bit of. It was written by Rich Lowry, and the headline is this: "The pointless government shutdown is over, but Schumer and the Dems' psychodrama is only just getting started." And I wanted to read through a little bit of this because I thought it was kind of an interesting read, and it builds on what we talked about yesterday with the show or on the show, I should say, with the ongoing government shutdown. So it reads as follows: "Our long national nightmare is over, but the Democrats' psychodrama isn't. The longest shutdown in U.S. history, with increasing pain points across the country, whether among travelers or SNAP recipients, is ending, while the Democrats are just getting started. It's complete BS," was a relatively mild take on the deal from one congressional progressive. "As a rule of thumb, government shutdowns are a bootless exercise. They rarely work because the party that causes the shutdown, thinking that they will provide them leverage, inevitably get blamed for the shutdown, and then, surprise, ends up in a worse position than where it began. Democrats managed to escape the worst political fallout from their weeks-long refusal to fund the government. Otherwise, their tactics failed, and predictably so." And so that's interesting. This is kind of the point I was talking about yesterday, and the question I still think remains, and I still think it's a valid one this morning. Where do you go from here? Democrats for the last 42 days have demanded and said the only way that the federal government reopens is if we get extensions of Obamacare ACA subsidies to give out to the American people. That's been their major messaging point since the beginning. Now, the SNAP stuff, that came in later, sure. But from day one, this was about expiring ACA tax credits, ACA subsidies. And to the chagrin of Chuck Schumer, to the chagrin of progressives and the more activist wing of the Democrat Party, they got none of those things. Apparently, some sort of handshake deal that some of this will get discussed and that there will be a vote sometime in the month of December with no guarantees that it will pass. I would say, at least at this point, in all likelihood, it won't. And so from their standpoint, a complete and total abysmal failure. The shutdown was supposedly all about securing more Obamacare subsidies, reads the piece over at the New York Post. This connection was entirely arbitrary, though. At the beginning of the shutdown, the Democrats spun the wheel and the bouncing ball landed on health care. They could just as easily have picked immigration, climate, or LGBTQIA plus policies as the reason they wanted a shutdown. The advantage of healthcare is that it is one issue where Democrats still have a significant advantage. And there's a lot of truth to that. From the overall messaging standpoint, it is for at least me, I'll say this morning, I think it is accurate to say that Democrats still have the messaging advantage on healthcare. Democrats still, for whatever reason, I don't know what the case is, they still have the ability to convince the American populace that they are the ones that are in favor of the middle class, everyday American. That they are the party that is in support of and will continue to fight for the little guy. And I think, as you and I would probably argue, that could not be further from the truth. I mean, they point to the Republicans and say that Trump and the GOP and MAGA, they're only interested in the billionaires and giving, the same washed over talking point. Oh, tax breaks for millionaires. Meanwhile, everybody else kind of gets screwed. It's just not the case. But Democrats, to their credit, I'll give the devil his due when it's worth it. They've done a really good job at messaging issues like healthcare. They've done a really good job with it. They maintained it was so imperative that Republicans extend forever Obamacare subsidies, first passed in 2021 and then re-upped in 2022 under Joe Biden, without a single Republican vote either time, that it was worth shutting down the government over. Republicans have sounded defense about health care during the fight, but the Democrat demand was so extravagant and the bad faith so obvious that the GOP was never going to cave. Sure enough, the GOP held firm as the shutdown began to bite. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer reduced the ask to a one-year extension of the subsidies. When that went nowhere, a band of relatively moderate Democrat senators broke ranks to support a deal for a mere Senate vote on the continued subsidies. Not a guarantee of passage, not even a promise of a vote in both houses of Congress. No, just a Senate vote on the Democrat priority that will probably fail. No wonder progressives are livid, but when isn't that the case? In the Trump years, to be progressive is to constantly feel an implacable sense of impotence and rage. This was the real reason for the shutdown. It was a readily available instrument for expressing an unreasoned hatred for Donald Trump. Democrats believed that the moment, as Otter famously said in the movie Animal House, required a stupid and futile gesture, and acted accordingly. On top of this, a Minority Leader Chuck Schumer desperately wanted to appease the Democrat base. The aging New Yorker is so vulnerable to a potential primary challenge from heartthrob Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that he must now look to her now the way a wounded wildebeest does to a hungry lion. Schumer had MSNBC viewers burning him in effigy earlier in the year when he refused to shut down the government. He didn't want to make that mistake again, but the flaw in his plan was that it only meant delaying the inevitable. And the reason I'm reading this piece over at the New York Post is it's a really good kind of summation of everything that has gone on. And it's a really good summation of the, not necessarily what has gone on with the 42 days, a little reference to it, but the larger discussion of the issues, because those haven't changed, right? Because the GOP didn't cave, as I predicted was not going to be the case, because there was nothing for them to cave on. Because that didn't happen, all of the issues that the Democrats are still dealing with, all of the outrage that somebody like Chuck Schumer is continuing to feel pressure-wise from the progressive left, none of that has gone away. I mean, you hear often in government, you've probably heard me say before, this is the definition of kicking the can down the road. It doesn't get any more crystal clear than this. This is over the last 42 days, Democrats have accomplished nothing, and I mean nothing, but kicking the can down the road. And in terms of the timeline for this, with these subsidies set to expire at the end of this calendar year, you're up against the clock. Thanksgiving is in what, 2 weeks? Immediately after that, people are back and you've got just a couple of weeks until Christmas. We're less than 7 weeks now from the end of the, we're less than 7 weeks now from the end of the year. I mean, so time is going to fly by over the next little less than 2 months. It's going to absolutely fly by. And so these 42 days of accomplishing nothing, these 42 days of really not having any sort of good faith negotiations on this at all. And I know that Schumer and Jeffries will say, oh, well, we tried to negotiate. We tried to talk with Trump. Donald Trump made it abundantly clear back in late September. I am willing to discuss these healthcare subsidies. And as I mentioned yesterday, there is a strong likelihood that Donald Trump not caves on the subsidies, but cuts some sort of deal with the Democrats, because he understands, I would hope that he understands the significant financial pain that this is going to cause for a lot of Americans. And him being in the Oval Office, Republicans having control of the House, having control of the Senate, it is going to be blamed on them when people, and they're already seeing it right now with some of their renewals. If you're somebody that's on the open healthcare exchange, you've probably gotten some correspondence from the healthcare exchange over the last couple of weeks showing the likelihood of your monthly premiums doubling. Meanwhile, you're getting the same or lesser insurance. So something is going to happen on this from a purely public and economic perspective. I don't believe that Donald Trump will allow these subsidies to fully expire. Now, there might be some changes in them. The eligibility might be a little bit different. I don't know exactly what it will look like. But as I mentioned yesterday, and again, I understand it's a crappy solution. I understand it's not what the vast majority of us would want. I'm not ignorant to that fact at all. Trump has a pretty good read of public perception. At least I like to think that's the case. And so it's going to be interesting to see now that Democrats have essentially pissed away 42 days heading towards the end of the year, and now they're back at square one. They're back at square one, and they can get their Democrat-only vote in the Senate. It will fail because they're nowhere near close to a majority. And then it's over. Mike Johnson's not going to take it up. And the question's going to be, does Trump, does Thune, does Johnson, do they negotiate with Schumer and Jeffrey in the coming weeks to get some sort of subsidy package dealt with for the ACA to provide some relief to the middle-class Americans? That's going to be the million-dollar question. Most congressional Democrats surely realize that it would be unsustainable to keep the government closed. Still, they aren't going to let that get in the way of their public posturing. They are both glad that people on their side are willing to do the right thing by voting to fund the government, and glad that those other people, not them, are taking the fall for it. Notably, presumptive 2028 presidential hopeful Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg, I hadn't heard his name thrown around recently, but I guess the old mayor from South Bend is back in the discussion, opposed the deal, knowing that maximal opposition to Donald Trump is the price for entry into Democrat primary politics. In short, the government shutdown may have been pointless and dumb, but there is much more where that came from. So a pretty interesting piece, fun piece over at the New York Post this morning. Rich Lowry's got it. The pointless government shutdown is over. I'll throw a link to that in the show notes over at patreon.com/Nick Craig, where you can support the show financially, get access to bonus content, including those daily show notes, and our monthly Patreon hangout. We jump on a Zoom call for an hour or two once a month, kind of shoot the breeze, talk about the political news, the big issues and topics of over the last couple of weeks, and kind of a roundtable discussion. Always great to catch up with our amazing Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Nick Craig. If you believe that you are getting some value from the show, I'd encourage you to support it. Patreon.com/Nick Craig. So the question really is, and this article kind of gets to the point of, where do you go from here? The issue still exists. The subsidies are still expiring at the end of December. Democrats accomplished nothing in this shutdown. Now, some will point to and say, oh, the government shutdown is what led Democrats to a very successful election night in November of 2025. I don't think that's the case. I'm sure in maybe a state like Virginia, you could say, especially Northern Virginia, you might be able to say that the government shutdown gave Democrats success. But when you look at the final tallies there, when you look at the final results, which I know I have written down on a piece of paper in here somewhere, when you look at those final results, the Virginia gubernatorial race was a 15-point advantage for the Democrat. So with a 15-point advantage, I'm very confident, and I will say to you confidently this morning, that 15-point gap is not because of the federal government shutdown. Did it drive some more progressive voters and some government employees out to vote? Sure, probably. Not going to argue that point at all. But did it account for 15%, a 15% margin of victory? I don't think so. Could have been 5 points, maybe even 8 or 9 points, sure. But it wasn't 15 percentage points. So the only area to me, and when the only elections looking geographically where the shutdown played the most significant impact would be in the state of Virginia, more prominently Northern Virginia, where so many folks who live in or work in and around the D.C. Metroplex live, because D.C. is a geographically relatively small area, and a lot of folks live out in portions of Virginia. So I don't think the government shutdown drove Democrats to success in the 2025 elections. I think the biggest issue was the economy. I mean, when you look at some of the immediate aftermath polling from the elections that took place in states like Virginia, New Jersey, and New York. Yes, we had municipal elections across North Carolina, but municipal elections have such low voter turnout that it's hard to look at a major issue like the economy as a driver. It had an impact, sure, played some sort of role, sure, but I think the big driver, the big issue in some of those other states, again, Virginia, New Jersey, New York City, was the economy. And coming up after the break, I want to read through a recent post on X from the co-founder of The Federalist, which is a phenomenal online publication. If you are not reading The Federalist and you're not tuned into their website, I would highly, highly encourage you to go and check them out. There is a guy, I believe I had him on the radio show back a couple of years ago. Sean Davis is the co-founder of The Federalist. They produce a whole bunch of phenomenal content, the constant source of news. It's one of the websites I check multiple times throughout the day to keep up to date. Sean Davis had a very interesting tweet that I want to read through and get your reaction on as well. We'll have that coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank Melissa Gott and her team at the Law Group for their continued support of the show, and let you know that when legal challenges arise, and some legal challenges are good, right? Whether, maybe you're buying a house, you're going through some sort of real estate transactions, those are good things. Now, however, not every legal challenge is a good one, and when those challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group right here in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating real estate transactions, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. They're located in downtown Wilmington. They're members of our community and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088 or lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group for their continued support and for any legal challenges across eastern North Carolina. Nobody better to call than Melissa Gott and her crew over at the Law Group. We'll grab a quick break. We'll get into this interesting post from Sean Davis over at the Federalist coming up here in just a couple of minutes as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Tuesday morning. Happy Veterans Day. Streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Tuesday morning to you. Happy Veterans Day. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. I want to read through an interesting post from Sean Davis, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Federalist. And this is, as we continue kind of our post-2025 election analysis, and a lot of questions are being asked of the GOP, of the Republicans. What is 2026 going to look like? This is an interesting post, and Sean Davis, who I highly respect, he's got a very good pulse of what's going on, posted this. He sent it out on November the 9th. So this would have been Sunday afternoon. He posted this, and it reads, "I don't know who is advising congressional Republicans on strategy right now, but it is whoever has an IQ barely approaching room temperature," which would of course be an IQ in, I don't know, the mid 70s. "Republicans right now have no accomplishments, no plans, and no vision. Why on earth would anyone be excited to go vote for them 12 months from now? Trump needs to ditch the foreign policy crap and focus all of his attention on the domestic economy, which is still not working for the majority of people. Right now, he looks weak and rudderless. Be mad all you want, but it's the truth. Newly minted college grads can't find work and are saddled with debt. Where is their path to an American dream right now? Who is giving them a vision of a future worth fighting for? You cannot have a viable country or future when half of your country and all of its young people are locked out of the economy and locked out of ever owning a home or much of anything beyond next month's streaming subscriptions. Does anyone in Washington care about this? Anyone at all? Republicans had better wake up, because right now their nightmare is only beginning if they don't start making massive changes." Now, let me state this. This is a very fiery tweet from Sean Davis. And before people, and I saw some people jumping on his post and saying, "Oh, you hate Trump, you're anti-MAGA." You obviously don't follow Sean Davis. He is not anti-Trump. He is not anti-MAGA. He is a true pragmatist. And what he says in that post is right. And has Trump had, now when he says comments, there's been no accomplishments. I don't agree with that, but the larger point that he's making is one that is accurate. Has Trump and Republicans had successes? Sure. But when you look specifically at the president himself, and you look at the major foreign policy wins, those are big, monumental things that hopefully will pay off for America in the future. But I have made this point ad nauseum, and you've heard me talk about this before, predominantly as it relates to tariffs, because those are having, of course, an immediate and direct impact on the economy. And the question has always been, does the American population, do middle-class Americans, do they have the financial, I don't even know what word to use to describe it. Do they have the financial ability? Do they have the financial flexibility to deal with these continued economic hardships to hopefully, and we don't even know that this happens, but hopefully in the future, get some major wins from these tariffs, from these trade deals? I do not know that the answer to this question is yes. And that puts Donald Trump and the Republicans in a very tough spot moving forward. And when he says, and I have to agree with him at this point, Trump needs to ditch the foreign policy crap and focus his attention on the domestic economy, he's spot on, folks. Shoot the messenger if you want, but if we are being bluntly honest with each other, and it's often hard for us to do, for the vast majority of people listening to my voice this morning or watching us on a variety of platforms, whether on video or audio. We are the political 1%. We follow this stuff day in and day out. Many of us would describe ourselves, or our family would describe us, our friends would describe us as political nuts, political nerds. We are not the average everyday American. And there comes a time where you have to take a step back from that and put yourself in the shoes of the regular, everyday, middle-class American. And if I'm being perfectly blunt and honest with you, they don't give a damn about Taiwan. They don't give a damn about Japan investing $200 billion into the U.S. economy over the next 30 years. They don't give a shit, folks. I hate to be so blatant about it, but it's the God's honest truth. They're wondering how the hell they're going to pay for Thanksgiving in 2 weeks. They're wondering how they're going to provide for their family as they head into Christmas. That's what they're worried about right now. And I'm not saying that the efforts that President Trump has made overseas are not good. And I don't fully agree with the comment from Sean Davis about ditching it completely. But there has been, I would argue at this point, a whole hell of a lot more emphasis on what's going on across the rest of the world than what's going on domestically. And that is a problem that this administration has to face. And the whole movement is based on MAGA. What does MAGA stand for? What does it mean? Make America great again. And I think you've got a lot of people right now, and yes, the 2025 elections, I think, shine a light on some of this, that are not feeling that America is heading in the right direction, that they do not believe that America is heading down the right path. And the reason for a lot of those responses is strictly based on the economy. I mean, you want to talk about an issue that has an outsized impact on everybody's day-to-day lives. There is no better place to look than the U.S. economy. When people are struggling every 2 weeks, when they are struggling month to month, that is not going to make them feel optimistic about the future. Looking at some of our comments coming in on our live chats this morning, newly minted college grads made their own mistakes. Whatever is happening to elites is not representative of society. There's some truth to that. And I don't disagree with the sentiment. And for a long time, you've heard me say that the so-called institution of higher learning that exists, colleges and college degrees, are in large part a kind of farcical. And you look at some of the ridiculous degrees that you can get at some of these schools and the insane amount of debt that you have to rack up to get them. That's true. That is totally true. That is totally accurate. But that's not everybody. I mean, you've got people that are going and getting, degrees in computer science, for example. That's still not a cheap degree. That's not a BS degree either. I mean, that's a degree that you should be able to pretty easily translate into something in the workforce. And that, depending on where you're going to school for that can still be an expensive degree. Tens of thousands of dollars. And when you look at the sentiment among college graduates, it's not good. Yes, some of it is, I'm going to go get a degree in, Greek architecture, and I'm going to spend $85,000 getting that degree, even though I'm completely unemployable because there's no professions in Greek architecture unless you're going to become a college professor, which is just kind of a circular feedback loop. The only people getting the degrees, their only employment is going and teaching or being in academia, which there's nothing wrong with being in academia, but it's not a degree in which there is a fruitful job market for. But it's not just those kind of garbage BS degrees where that's the case. It's over a lot of different professions. It's over a lot of different fields. And it is something real. And it is something that is I would argue, is a major pain point for a lot of Americans, predominantly younger Americans. And so as we go back to Sean Davis's post on X, talks about ditching the foreign policy and putting all of his attention on the domestic economy. And I think he's absolutely spot on about this. And when he says right now, he's referring to Trump, right now he looks weak and rudderless. I don't agree with that, at least all the way through. But in terms of the American economy, in terms of bringing some sort of economic prosperity to the broad base of the American consumer, that has largely not happened. And this ties in very well with the government shutdown that just happened. Well, again, what was the issue that Democrats were shutting down the government over? Obamacare, ACA subsidies that are set to expire. That is not going to help the domestic economy at all. You are going to see a lot of people either have their monthly budgets torn up by doubling or tripling of their monthly healthcare premiums, or them just dropping their health insurance completely because they can't afford it. And then, God forbid, they have a medical issue, they have to rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of medical debt that will permanently bury them financially. Neither of those situations are good. And it's why I made the point yesterday, and I got some Some interesting comments after yesterday's show, some emails and some posts, some messages on X. Folks not necessarily in full agreement with my points. But that's why I believe that when the president told Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries back in late September that I'm willing to discuss these subsidies, I'm willing to discuss some of these tax credits, but you've got to reopen the government. I don't think Trump was BSing them. I don't think that he was blowing smoke up their ass. I think he actually genuinely is interested because he understands the impact that will have on the middle class, who, of course, is always disproportionately affected by this. If you are on the low side of the income scale, if you're what would be close to or at the line of poverty, you're eligible for a lot of services, whether from the federal government or from the state. If you are a high income earner, you don't need to take advantage of those programs. You probably have the financial wiggle room and the financial flexibility to eat some of these costs. It's the middle class that is stuck in the middle. You make too much to be eligible for subsidies and programs and all of that stuff, but you don't make enough to deal with insanely high rising costs. And so you're watching the middle class continue to get squeezed. Many folks are falling into the lower side, and that is squeezing it from one way. And then you've got other individuals who are raising their income, and it no longer is an issue. At least, issue is probably not the right word to use, but it's no longer a stress every single month that you can't put food on the table. And so you've got this narrowing group of individuals in the middle that are the ones that are truly feeling the pain. Comment coming in on our Rumble live chat. Call me crazy, but I'm optimistic about the economy. I don't know that I'm not going to call you crazy for having that opinion, but I'll say you're probably not in the norm because that's not what folks are feeling. They generally do not have a good view of the economy. They generally do not feel good about the country moving forward. And I had the chance to look at some exit polling out of Jersey, Virginia, and a little bit New York City. But the New York City election's kind of a weird one to handicap because of the very odd political makeup. But you look at New Jersey and you look at Virginia. Yes, those are states that are that definitely have more Democrats than Republicans. I'm not going to bury the lead on that. The top issue was the economy in almost every single exit poll that I looked at. Almost every single one of them. And it was the economy, healthcare, and education. Those were typically the top three issues. Democrats winning on the economy, of course, winning on healthcare, and winning on some educational issues in those states from a public perception standpoint. And a lot of that, the reason that the Democrats are winning, and I'll throw that in air quotes, is because the Republicans are in charge. And if people don't feel that those things are moving in the right direction, they point the finger at the person that's in charge. Plain and simple. Another comment coming in, is Trump going to make it up? Is Trump going to make it up by the possible $2,000 check from tariffs? You know, I haven't talked about that yet, and I've seen some of the reporting on that, and I've read about that. That's not going to change people's opinion on the economy. If you give somebody, and I am not saying that $2,000 is not significant to a lot of people, it is. But if you give somebody a $2,000 check that is living paycheck to paycheck, you have probably relieved some of their stress, relieved some of their pressure for at most 4 to 6 months. So unless this administration plans to write, which I'm not in favor of, unless this administration plans on writing people a $2,000 check every 4 months, I don't see that there's any long-term benefit of that at all. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you're struggling to make your monthly bills, your mortgage, your electrical bill, your food costs, your gas, your healthcare costs, if you're struggling to make those payments every month, $2,000 is not changing your position at all. You might get 2, 3, 4 months of a little bit of more flexibility, a little bit of more breathing room, but then that $2,000 is gone and you are back in the same boat that you were beforehand. And so I think the $2,000 from tariffs, Trump might see a short bump with that. I mean, I know we saw that during COVID. You might get a little bit of economic stimulation with that, but it doesn't solve the overall problem, which is still the fact that people do not feel good about the economy. Prices are still high. And a lot of that is going to, I hope it doesn't happen, but the thought is that is going to probably continue to get worse due to the tariffs. And so, as we look at what happened last week, we look at the elections 1 week ago, and as we look at moving forward into 2026, Donald Trump, who has a good read on this stuff, he's not a stupid guy. He has very smart people around him. A lot of those individuals very much have their ear to the ground. They know what's going on with this stuff. They can understand what's happening in regular, everyday, middle-class American households. There's got to be some more emphasis on this, because I agree with a lot of what Sean Davis wrote in this post. And if you are looking at it from the non-tuned-in person, if you are looking at this from the voter that shows up just every 2 years, they don't vote in the primary, but they show up every 2 years and vote. They don't vote in their municipal elections. Right now, if you polled one of those people and said, what are some of the accomplishments of the Trump administration? They might say, the war between Israel and Hamas. Yeah, that's a win, but it doesn't have any impact on your life. It's not making any of your daily or monthly concerns subside at all. And I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but it doesn't impact your life. I mean, unless you are somebody that is living in Israel or has family in Israel, which of course there are plenty that do, but for the vast majority of Americans who have no tie to Israel, to the Middle East, to Gaza, to anything in that region, it has no impact on your life. I'm not saying it was a useless effort. I'm glad that the president was able to do what the previous administration couldn't. Sure. But for the family that is wondering what is Christmas going to look like this year because of inflation and because of the economy over the last 4 or 5 years, which still in a large part still hasn't recovered from COVID, they don't care. And so the messaging for the Republicans, and a lot of this will come from Trump, even though his name is not on a ballot in 2026. The messaging from Republicans, the messaging from Trump has got to focus back stateside. And there has got to be substantial victories and substantial wins for the middle class. And that the vast majority of those wins has to come directly through the domestic economy. That's where people feel it. They interact with it every day. Whether they're filling up gas a couple of times a week, whether they're going to the grocery store, they're paying their bills. Many of you, like me, flipped on your heat for the first time this week, so you'll see your power bills skyrocketing as it relates to that. That's where those wins have to be. And I think it is accurate that a lot of those issues have not taken place right now. Another good point coming into our chat, closing the border. Trump has been very successful. I'm not arguing that Trump hasn't been successful, and I don't think Sean Davis is arguing that Trump hasn't been successful. I think, and the border, that was Trump. That's not the Senate or the House. That's not congressional Republicans. That was a Trump campaign promise that he has followed through on. No question about it. I think the question is for regular, everyday, non-politically astute people, which again is hard for us because we're in the thick of it. But for those individuals, do they feel that Trump and Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House, do they feel that they've been successful? If you look at the data and if you look at polling, the answer to that question right now is no, it's not. Whether we want to like it or not, whether we think it's a good idea or not. Now, let's be clear. I mean, the Democrats are very unfavorable as well. Here's the latest over at Real Clear Politics. Democrats' unfavorability is 58%. Their favorability is 33%. Republicans, 52% unfavorable, 40% favorable. So Republicans are doing better than Democrats, sure. But look at the direction of the country. I mean, you've got almost 58% of the people that say things are heading in the wrong direction. That's not a good plan. That's not a good situation at all. Aqua Blue is pointing out in our Rumble live chat, eggs down, gas down, but not enough. Yeah, it's not enough. I mean, I spent $2.99 on Interstate 40 filling up gas this weekend. I mean, it's down a little bit, sure, but it was $2.99 at the Warsaw exit, about the halfway point between here and Raleigh. It was $2.99 at Warsaw this weekend, Sunday. So it's still up there. Is it down a little bit? Sure, but it's not down enough to make the substantial impact. So a little bit of food for thought, something to keep in the back of your mind. The midterm elections are not set in stone at anywhere near close to that. There very well could be, and as I mentioned last week in the immediate aftermath of the 2025 elections, the issues or issue that defines the election of 2026 may have not even happened yet. The big issue. But there are those other problems that are the top of the mind on every single election. It's the economy, it's healthcare, it's crime. Those issues are always bunched towards the top. And right now, because Republicans are in power, because Republicans are in control, if people don't feel that the economy is improving quickly enough, there's only one person for them to point the finger at, and it's the man and it's the party in charge. That is why midterm elections are always so brutal for the party that is in charge. So it's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on. It's something that we will track as we head into the latter parts of this year, looking at the end of this year and into the primary in March. And then, of course, a general election coming up a little less than 1 year from now. We'll keep an eye on it. And I'm curious on your feedback. What do you think on Sean Davis's comments? What do you think on my comments? Are we on to something? Are we dead wrong? I'd be very curious to hear what you think. You can leave us a comment on our YouTube, Rumble, X, or Facebook feeds. You can send a commentary on X as well, at Nicholas M. Craig, or if you want to send me an email, you can do so as well. It's nick@nickcraig.com. If you want to get some of your feedback, always appreciate those comments. And if they are relevant and timely on what we're talking about, bring those up here and read them on the show. Once again, a variety of Veterans Day events happening across the Cape Fear region today. If you've got the availability here, come midday to get out there and honor all of the amazing brave men and women that are currently serving and have served the United States of America in all of the different forms of our military. Encourage you to do so, and we thank and honor all of those today on this Veterans Day, November the 11th, 2025. That's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the program. Keeping an eye on the government shutdown in Washington, D.C. We'll bring you up to date on that tomorrow. The Law Group, appreciate their support. LawGroupNC.com or 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and is, of course, available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. We're back here tomorrow morning for The Nick Craig Show.